The scene opens in complete chaos. Blood stains the ground, bodies lie lifeless, and screams echo all around. In the center of it all, a single warrior stands victorious, his presence commanding fear and respect. A crown is placed upon his head as he claims his new title, King. Just as he takes in his victory, another figure charges at him, aiming to take his life. But the attempt is futile. With a swift and effortless strike, he eliminates the threat. Then, everything fades. The crowned warrior stares at a mask, lost in thought. His mind drifts as a strange feeling washes over him. Before he can process it, darkness engulfs him. He feels weightless, like he's sinking into an endless ocean. A distant voice whispers through the void, telling him to seek the light in his new life. When he opens his eyes again, everything is different. The once mighty king is now an infant, cradled in the arms of two unfamiliar people. They gaze at him with love and joy, calling him by a name he doesn't recognize, Arthur. His father, with a warm smile, tells him to call him Dad. But Arthur is bewildered. Who are these people? Why is he here? It doesn't take long for him to piece it together. He has died and been reborn in another world. And to make matters worse, he's powerless. No strength, no authority, just a helpless baby in the care of strangers who truly believe he is their son. The days pass, and despite his frustration, Arthur is forced to live the life of a normal child. His father dotes on him, playing with him constantly, while his mother showers him with endless affection. He doesn't understand it. He was once a ruler, a warrior feared by many. Now he can't even lift his own head properly. His new life feels like a cage, a prison where he has no control over anything. He tries to shake the feeling that this is all just a bad dream, but deep down, he knows it's real. And it's only going to get stranger. One afternoon, Arthur watches as his father trains outside. The man is powerful, effortlessly wielding magic to move massive stones. Arthur is in awe. This world has forces beyond his understanding. Just as he's processing this new discovery, his father makes a mistake, injuring himself with a stray rock. Before Arthur can react, his mother rushes over and heals him with high-level magic. Arthur is stunned. If this kind of power exists, then he needs to learn how to use it. The next morning, his father heads into the forest to train again, but this time, he isn't alone. A group of people gathers around him, clearly his allies. Arthur watches from a distance, realizing that combat is a normal part of life in this world. When his father returns home later that day, he's greeted warmly by his wife and son. Arthur studies his father closely, observing every detail. He notices the blood on his hands and the weapon strapped to his back. In this world, it seems carrying weapons is completely normal, maybe even necessary. That means one thing: he needs to grow stronger, fast. Despite his frustration, he finds himself growing attached to this family. Their kindness is foreign to him, something he never experienced in his previous life. He recalls the times he had to fight for survival, always alert, never truly resting. Here, he sleeps in a warm bed, completely safe. It's unfamiliar, but not entirely unwelcome. As time passes, Arthur starts crawling, slowly gaining control over his body. His parents cheer him on, watching closely to make sure he doesn't hurt himself. One day, he catches sight of his reflection in a mirror. Staring at his small, unfamiliar face, he still can't fully accept this identity. The name Arthur, the helpless body, it all feels surreal. One night, after being tucked into bed, he waits until his mother leaves before making his move. Carefully, he crawls out of bed, determined to explore. His goal is the library. He has seen his parents go in there many times, and if he's going to understand this world, books are the best place to start. Slowly and silently, he makes his way there, avoiding detection. When he finally reaches the library, he pulls out a book and starts reading. Knowledge is power, that much he knows. As he flips through the pages, he discovers that this land is called Decadent and is divided into 3 kingdoms. The first is Dwarven Kingdom, a kingdom of people who live underground. The second is Dwarven Kingdom, home to the elves who reside deep within the forests. And lastly, there is Sabin, the kingdom he now belongs to. Unlike his previous world, where power had to be seized, here the throne is passed down through bloodlines. Curious, he grabs another book, but in his eagerness, he knocks both to the floor. He sighs, realizing this world is far less advanced than his old one. Its technology is primitive, but one thing stands out: magic. This world runs on mana, a force that can be inherited and used in two primary ways: enhancement and summoning. Enhancers strengthen their bodies, increasing their speed, power, and durability. Summoners, on the other hand, can manipulate mana to shape reality as they see fit. Arthur thinks back to the healing magic his mother used. If mana follows these two main paths, then there must be exceptions. He flips through more pages, searching for answers. The key to mastering mana, he learns, lies in something called the essence of mana. Most mages begin training around puberty, slowly gathering mana into a single core within their bodies. Arthur's mind races. This concept isn't entirely foreign to him. In his past life, he had mastered controlling his inner energy, using it as a weapon. If he could do that before, then surely he could do it again. Determined, he closes his eyes and focuses. Slowly, he attempts to gather the mana within his body, guiding it toward a single point. It's difficult, but not impossible. He can feel it, the energy responding to his will. But before he can push further, his mother suddenly appears, her voice filled with worry. She scolds him for sneaking off and warns him not to do it again. However, her expression shifts as she looks at him closely, almost as if she senses something different about him. A small smile forms on her lips as she gently pats his head. Arthur had no choice but to accept his reality. Stuck in the body of a baby, he felt trapped. Even the smallest things, like getting his diaper changed, reminded him how powerless he was. He needed to get stronger, fast. 2 years passed, and his mother often wrote in her diary, always praising him as the most beautiful and intelligent child. But there was one thing that bothered her. He had never smiled, not even once. Meanwhile, outside, Arthur was practicing with a stick, swinging it like a sword while his father watched. Impressed, his father called his mother to see, but she was furious. She scolded him, saying Arthur was too young to be handling weapons. Arthur quickly realized that in this world, mothers held all the power. One day, they took a trip to the city, and Arthur couldn't contain his excitement. He observed everything carefully, taking in all the new sights. He saw people using weapons, strange glowing stones, and even real magic. It was a lot to process, but he knew one thing: this world had power he needed to understand. As they headed home, exhaustion took over and he fell asleep, thinking about his new family. Despite feeling suffocated by this life, he couldn't deny that they genuinely cared for him. It made him wonder, wasn't this what family was supposed to be like? His past life flashed in his mind: the orphanage, the loneliness. Feeling warmth and love like this was something he had never experienced before. That night, while he slept, his mother spoke softly to him, mentioning how she noticed his habits, sneaking off to read books, pretending to be asleep when he wasn't. She knew he'd eventually want to explore the outside world. The next day, Arthur watched his father use magic to move stones. Seeing it firsthand made Arthur realize how lucky he was. He had a living example to learn from. His father's magic was powerful, and Arthur was sure now he had inherited the strength of an enhancement-type mage. Arthur's hunger for knowledge grew stronger. He wanted to read more, to understand this world better. When his parents tried to put him to bed, he used his innocent look to convince them to let him stay up and read. His mother resisted at first, but eventually gave in. Over the last 2 years, Arthur had learned a lot, but his biggest discovery was mana cores. He figured out how to gather energy into a single point in his body. It was tough, but his training was finally paying off. Then, disaster struck. A massive explosion rocked the house. His father barely had time to protect his mother before running inside to find Arthur. What he saw left him speechless. His son, not even 3 years old, had managed to control mana essence. Arthur was thrilled by his progress, but before he could process it, wooden beams collapsed toward him. He braced for impact, thinking this was the end, but his parents saved him just in time. His mother cried, overwhelmed by what had happened, but also relieved that Arthur was safe. As he looked at her, something strange happened. His eyes welled up with tears. He had never cried before, never felt this kind of emotion in his past life. He didn't understand why, but he hugged his mother tightly, tears falling freely. For the first time, he truly felt what it meant to be loved. But there was no time to dwell on emotions. Just as things settle down, a terrifying monster is shown. We then flash back to Arthur's previous life, when he was known as King Grey. In this life, he's presiding over a royal court session, delivering judgment to a man who had attempted to assassinate him. Despite the severity of the crime, the royal council has chosen mercy. The man is to be escorted back to his homeland with his family, where his final sentence will be delivered. The man, knowing his fate is sealed, pleads with the court. He admits to attacking the king, but insists the crime is his alone. He begs them not to punish his wife and son. He knows all too well returning to his home country would be a fate worse than death. Accepting his punishment, he asks only that his family be spared. Dropping to his knees, he directs his plea straight to King Grey. The council warns him that a man of his low status has no right to address the king directly. But before they can say more, King Grey steps forward. Without hesitation, he swiftly executes the man's family in front of him. A merciful act in the king's eyes, saving them from endless suffering. Shocked and heartbroken, the man can only bow his head in acceptance, understanding that this was the best outcome he could hope for. Back in the present timeline, a few years have passed. Arthur is now being trained in combat by his father Reynolds. One day, Reynolds tries to give Arthur a pair of gloves identical to his own, but Arthur turns them down. He prefers using a sword, reasoning that with his small body, trying to fight hand-to-hand would get him killed before he could even land a hit. Though it clearly disappoints Reynolds, he had looked forward to passing the gloves down. He respects Arthur's choice and begins training him with a sword instead. After a few exchanges, Reynolds demonstrates how to channel mana into his weapon to enhance its power. Arthur, watching closely, understands the process almost instantly. Mimicking the move, he pours mana into his wooden sword and manages to shatter Reynolds' reinforced training stick in one clean strike. Reynolds is stunned. Later, he confides in Alice, Arthur's mother, telling her that Arthur needs a real teacher, someone who can help him reach his full potential. While Reynolds had always assumed he'd be the one to train his son, it's become clear Arthur is beyond his level. Alice isn't so sure. She offers to teach Arthur magic herself, but Reynolds points out that Arthur's situation is unique. The boy managed to cut through mana-reinforced wood, and he's only 4 years old. Alice is stunned at this revelation, but still hesitant to let her son go. A heated discussion begins, with Arthur quietly watching them. He realizes that emotions often cloud judgment, so he offers a third option. Why don't they all go together? After a long pause, both parents smile, impressed by his maturity. They agree it's a great idea, and begin packing for the journey. Seeing how energetic and excited his parents are brings a genuine smile to Arthur's face. Soon after, the transport arrives. At Reynolds' request, Arthur introduces himself to the people picking them up. Their leader assumes Arthur doesn't recognize him, but Arthur remembers exactly who they are. Adventurers who helped rebuild their home after it was destroyed. They're called the Twin Horns, a group that once included both Reynolds and Alice. Their leader is Adam Crench, and the rest of the team includes Angela Rose, Durden Walker, Jasmine Flamesworth, and Helen Shart. Basically, the kind of names you'd expect from an all-star NBA roster. With everything in order, the journey begins. Arthur can't help but think how primitive this mode of transportation is, compared to the advanced tech he knew in his past life. Still, it's not so bad. He gets to sit next to his mom, which makes the ride surprisingly cozy. They're headed to a city called Cyrus, which should be interesting, but Arthur knows one thing for sure. In this world, danger is always lurking, no matter where you go. That becomes clear when the group sets up camp for the night and is suddenly attacked by monsters. Everyone jumps into action. Watching the fight, Arthur observes that Adam, Helen, and Jasmine are enhancers, while Angela and Durden appear to be casters. After the monsters are wiped out, he's impressed by how well the team fights together. He knows that one day he'll need to be just as strong. Later that night, while eating around the campfire, Arthur reflects that it's silly to expect comfort while traveling, but at least the food is warm and freshly made. Suddenly, Alice sighs deeply. Arthur asks what's wrong, and she says she's full, though Arthur keeps staring at her plate. Alice then notices that Reynolds' arm is injured. She sets her food aside to go heal him, but Helen and Jasmine stop her for a moment, sensing something in the forest. They position themselves to guard while Alice tends to Reynolds' wound using her healing magic. Arthur reflects on how his mother might be a rare type of mage known as an emitter, someone with healing abilities. Since they're so uncommon, emitter mages usually keep a low profile. Healing openly would only make her a target. That realization helps him understand why his parents chose to live quietly, hidden away in the countryside. A few moments later, Alice finishes healing Reynolds. Then, out of the blue, Adam says he wants to get a little workout in before bed and asks Reynolds for permission to take Arthur along for a quick training session. Arthur's caught off guard, but since his dad doesn't object, he doesn't have much choice. Training it is. As they begin, Arthur notices Adam wields a spear. He starts to worry that this might be more than just light exercise, especially since, well, he's only 4 years old. But he decides not to complain. Instead, he keeps his doubts to himself. Adam asks if he's ready. Then he starts channeling mana into his weapon, and Arthur can tell immediately he's not holding back. So Arthur does the same, imbuing mana into both his weapon and legs. That little surprise catches Adam off guard. Wasting no time, Arthur dashes straight at him. Adam tries to block, but in an instant, Arthur vanishes from his line of sight, reappearing behind him. He skids a bit in the dirt but manages to keep his balance. Despite his young age, Arthur keeps up with Adam's attacks until Adam lands a powerful blow that sends him flying. Arthur realizes his body is still way too light. Thankfully, Angela uses her wind magic to gently bring him down, saving him from a rough crash landing. Alice breathes a huge sigh of relief. She was this close to watching her little bonbon get splattered. Arthur thanks Angela, while the rest of the group immediately scolds Adam for going way too hard on a child. Adam tries to defend himself by saying Arthur's a little monster, but that's not enough to get him off the hook. As the group argues, Arthur, still catching his breath, gets startled by Yasmin suddenly appearing beside him. She simply asks, "How did you do that?" Arthur stays quiet. He doesn't really know what to say, but he does recognize that look in her eyes. The look of someone who won't back down until she learns what she wants. The journey continues smoothly after that. Along the way, Arthur keeps training, not just with Adam, but with everyone in the group. He learns a ton and even shares some wisdom from his past life. It's been a truly eye-opening experience. He even shows Yasmin how to enhance her footwork using mana for high-speed movement. Over time, he starts noticing that she's sticking closer to him, something that doesn't bother him at all. Then one day, something unexpected happens. Yasmin finds out it's Arthur's birthday and decides to thank him for everything he's taught her. She gives him a knife as a gift. Arthur is a little surprised, but genuinely grateful. It's clear now she's grown attached to him. As they're talking, the other girls notice and are stunned. Yasmin isn't exactly known for being affectionate with anyone. Alice, watching from afar, teases that it's probably because her son is so charming. Adam calls out that it's time to move, and Alice relays the message to Arthur. But then Arthur notices something. Alice briefly makes a face like something's wrong. He asks her about it, and she quickly brushes it off with a smile, saying, "It's nothing." Still, the way she dodged the question leaves him worried. Later, while traveling through the mountains, the group suddenly gets ambushed by a gang of bandits. Arrows rain down, pinning them in place as enemies begin to surround them. Luckily, Angela steps up and deflects the arrows using her wind magic. Arthur immediately realizes this is a serious situation. That's when the bandit leader steps forward and makes his demand. They're to hand over the woman and the child unharmed or risk lowering their value. He then orders his men to attack from both flanks. Despite the chaos, Alice stays calm, comforting Arthur and telling him she'll protect him. Arthur believes her, and that gives him strength. Durden moves to intercept the enemies attacking from above with his magic, while Reynolds takes the front line with his short-range combat style, supporting the team with everything he's got. Helen fired arrow after arrow at any bandits she could reach, while Adam and Yasmin fiercely held the line, defending the caravans with everything they had. Arthur analyzed the situation. Individually, they had the upper hand, but what really worried him was the sheer number of enemies. The bandits had the numbers, and that strength in unity was starting to take its toll. As the fight dragged on, fatigue began to show. Then, in a brutal move, the bandit leader hurled Reynolds against one of the wagons, leaving him badly wounded. This forced Alice and Arthur to jump out of hiding. Despite his injuries, Reynolds immediately ordered them to stay back. He knew it would be a huge problem if the bandits discovered what kind of power his wife truly possessed. Coughing through the pain, Reynolds looked at Arthur and told him to take his mother and run. Arthur hesitated. He believed he was strong enough to fight, strong enough to stand his ground. But Reynolds shook his head and told him the truth. Alice was pregnant. The news hit Arthur like a bolt of lightning. Everything started to make sense. Her strange behavior, the way she was always holding back. Now he understood. Fueled by a new sense of purpose, Arthur accepted his father's request. Without wasting another second, he grabbed his mother's hand and bolted from the battlefield. The bandit leader, realizing their plan, ordered his men to intercept them. But just as they were about to strike, Reynolds launched forward and landed a massive punch. The leader blocked with his giant axe, but this time Reynolds wasn't holding back. The sheer force of the punch made the man stagger back several feet. Meanwhile, a group of bandits tried to cut off Arthur and Alice's escape, but were taken out just in time. Yasmin and Adam tossed them weapons, yelling for Arthur to keep going, not to look back. The rest of the group followed their lead, throwing everything they had to clear a path for the mother and son. As Arthur sprinted, heart pounding, he couldn't help but reflect. He had taken so much from others in his past life, and now here he was, running to protect what little he had left. He remembered that family he destroyed with his own hands. Maybe this was karma. Just when he thought they'd made it far enough, a hidden enemy struck. A wind mage appeared out of nowhere, casting a powerful spell. Arthur reacted just in time, pushing his mother out of the way. But the spell hit him full force, sending him flying off a cliff. As he fell, time slowed. He didn't plan on dying alone, so he grabbed the dagger tied to his belt, hurled it upward, and managed to catch the wind mage by the leg, dragging the attacker down with him. Back at the battlefield, Angela and Dordan cast their spells, trying to catch Arthur mid-fall. As the wind howled around him, Arthur felt something strange in his chest. Not fear, not pain, something warm. He realized he finally understood what that man meant, why they cried back then. He thought about the family he destroyed, the house he burned to ashes, and how the parents had only been grateful that their child was spared. That man had sacrificed himself to protect the people he loved. Tears welled up in Arthur's eyes. Joy and sorrow twisted together inside him. He remembered his father's words and the fact that he was going to be a big brother, something he never thought he'd experience. It made the tears fall even harder. As the ground rushed toward him, the screen fades. And in the next scene, Arthur's still alive. He awakens in a mysterious forest, somewhere unfamiliar. The first thing he sees is a massive, intimidating beast looming over him. The creature looks him dead in the eyes, says, "Good morning, Arthur," and greets him by name. Arthur is stunned. That's the last thing he expected. Two shadowy figures briefly appear, engaged in a quiet conversation. One of them shares that they've discovered something incredibly beautiful, so rare they might never witness it again. The other figure, sensing danger, wonders aloud whether something terrible is about to happen. The first confirms it will, unless something changes. Elsewhere, Arthur stares at a mysterious creature. Confused and alarmed, he finds himself asking internally what the creature is, and more importantly, why it's here. But the biggest question gnawing at him is whether it's a friend or a threat. Suddenly, the creature twitches. Arthur reacts instantly, launching himself forward to attack. But before he can make contact, the creature casually flicks a finger, swatting him away and sending him flying like a rag doll. Landing hard, Arthur hears the creature speak in a calm, firm tone. It addresses him by name and tells him that he still has a lot to learn. It adds that it isn't his enemy, implying that Arthur may want to ease up on the hostility. The creature then walks over to an odd wall covered in fruit-bearing roots. Plucking a few fruits, it tells Arthur that he must be hungry. Even if he isn't, the creature insists he needs nourishment to regain strength and recover. Arthur attempts to speak, but his pain gets the better of him. The creature remarks that he's lucky to be alive and says that answers will only come after he eats. Accepting the condition, Arthur devours the fruit. Once he finishes, his first concern spills out. He desperately wants to know if his parents are safe. The creature calmly reassures him that they're alive and had continued their journey days ago. To prove it, it conjures a magical image showing the site where they were ambushed. The vision overwhelms Arthur with emotion. Tears stream down his face, relief and joy crashing into him all at once. With the heavy burden finally lifted, he attempts to thank the creature, only to realize he doesn't know her name. She smiles and introduces herself as Sylvia. Over the next few days, Arthur recovers under Sylvia's care. He expresses a strong desire to return home, but Sylvia explains that they're near the edge of a forest swarming with bandits and wild beasts. She assures him that she knows a safe path, but notes that creating a spatial portal requires careful preparation. Understanding the situation, Arthur begins to train right away. Sylvia appreciates his drive and remarks that children should stay active. Yet, Arthur can't help but notice how guarded Sylvia is. She never talks about herself. Her monstrous appearance has even startled him more than once, like a living jump scare. Still, beneath the surface, he senses an unmistakable warmth and kindness. One day, as Arthur meditates, Sylvia observes something intriguing. She realizes that he already possesses a mana core despite his young age. Curious, she asks him to try something. Then, right before his eyes, she creates a spell in one hand while simultaneously gathering mana. Arthur is stunned. She's drawing energy and casting at the same time, something he didn't even think was possible. Sylvia explains that humans often treat mana as something rigid, only storing and using it. But for mana beasts like her, such techniques are second nature. She then asks Arthur if he wants to learn this ability. Without hesitation, Arthur agrees, but before she teaches him, Sylvia asks a serious question. What does he plan to do with that power? She makes it clear that she refuses to pass on strength to someone who might misuse it. Arthur thinks for a moment, then recalls the recent ambush. He declares that he'll use his power to kill anyone who tries to take away what matters to him. Sylvia doesn't accept that answer. With a flick of her finger, she strikes him again and scolds him. That wasn't what she was hoping to hear. Arthur pushes back, arguing that fighting and killing enemies is necessary. That mindset made him the strongest king in his past life. But Sylvia isn't convinced. She urges him not to throw away the life she saved on hate and revenge. With surprising tenderness, she strokes his face with a clawed hand and tells him that she could easily end his life if she wanted to, but she'd rather pat his head instead. Arthur blushes, flustered, and admits he'd prefer that too. Sylvia smiles, calling it the better choice. She tells him that anger and hatred are easy to ignite, but they leave nothing behind. She wants a better path for him. Then she asks once more, what will he do with his power? This time, Arthur reflects deeply. He remembers peaceful moments with his parents and the adventures he shared with the Twin Horns party. With newfound clarity, he answers that he wants to use his strength to protect the people he loves. Sylvia finally hears the answer she was waiting for. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, another creature much like Sylvia roams silently. It senses her presence and knows that she cannot hide. Rising into the air, it continues its search, but its true intent remains a mystery. The scene shifts again, this time to Arthur's past life. Back then, he was known as King Grey. One day, he left his chambers to visit an influential noble within the castle. Although he held the title of king, real power resided with the parliament. With dwindling resources and declining birth rates, kings had been reduced to weapons of war. During the visit, the noble flattered him, praising his conquests and celebrating the wealth and glory his brutal victories had brought. Then, with a curious tone, the noble asked what brought the great King Grey to his home. Grey said nothing. Without a word, he turned around and walked away. After that, we see a shattered display case. A crown lies broken on the ground, and next to it, a sword is stabbed into the floor. Back in the present, Sylvia is teaching Arthur how to use magic by gathering mana. He needs to collect it while using it, and once he can do that, his magical abilities will expand significantly. Arthur struggles to stay focused, but he keeps repeating to himself that he can't rush. He has to stay in control. We flash back to his past during a training match. There was so much he didn't have back then. What he wanted most was to control mana, to win, to improve. That experience fuels him, and he finally succeeds in activating the skill. He's thrilled. Sylvia congratulates him, but when he walks toward her, she suddenly punches him into a pile of rocks. He's completely confused, even more so when he realizes he's wrapped in some kind of magic barrier. Sylvia tells him to stay quiet, so Arthur just peeks through a hole between the rocks to see what's happening. That's when a mysterious figure suddenly appears, the one who had been searching for her. Arthur wonders who he is. Even though he looks like Sylvia, he gives off a completely different, threatening vibe. Sylvia says she's surprised he found her, and the man responds that the pain in her blood led him there. He cuts straight to the point. He wants her to come with him. Sylvia refuses without hesitation. The man sighs and says he didn't want to use violence, but he's okay with it. He quickly charges up a powerful dark energy attack and fires it at her. Though Sylvia blocks the attack, the force overwhelms her. She collapses, weak and unable to hold her ground. In her injured state, she sends a telepathic message to Arthur, telling him not to worry. Arthur quietly keeps watching. The man warns Sylvia that if she pushes herself, she'll only shorten the little time she has left to live. But Sylvia snaps back that the same goes for him. Suddenly, her entire body starts to transform. In just a few seconds, she reveals her true form, a magnificent white dragon. The moment she takes that form, she unleashes a devastating energy breath, which the man struggles to block. He warns her that using such power will cost her, but Sylvia says it doesn't matter. She's already been happy. Though she admits she wished it could have lasted longer. The man manages to deflect her breath attack, but the force causes the cave to begin collapsing. Acting quickly, he casts a spell to stop the cave-in. It's a magical blast that explodes in all directions. Sylvia shields herself with her wings, but since the attack covers such a wide area, she quickly checks to make sure Arthur is still hidden and safe behind the rocks. When she sees he's unharmed, she feels a huge wave of relief. But that split-second distraction gives the enemy a chance to charge another wave of dark energy. Sylvia clearly doesn't like what she's seeing. The man throws the energy sphere at her, and in response, Sylvia activates a time-freezing ability. Arthur isn't affected by the spell, so Sylvia calls him over. Arthur walks up and asks what's going on. Sylvia explains that she used her power, but more importantly, she wants to know what he thinks of her new form. Arthur guesses she's a dragon, and she confirms it, though that's just what humans call them. Putting that aside, she tells him they need to move quickly. She opens a portal and apologizes for not being able to bring him closer to safety. Still, she reassures him that he'll be okay. He's learned enough to survive. Before saying goodbye, she asks what he plans to use his powers for. Arthur answers, with some pain in his voice, that he wants to protect the people he loves. Sylvia accepts that as a promise. Arthur then notices her injury and starts to worry. To shift his focus, Sylvia tells him she has something for him, a strange-looking egg and a feather. She instructs him to wrap the egg in the feather and protect it with his life. Then she gently presses her nose against him, which causes 2 glowing marks to appear on his arms. Arthur asks what they are, but Sylvia, weakening, just says he'll find out in time. It's time to say goodbye. But before he leaves, Sylvia confesses she could have sent him home earlier. She just didn't want to. She enjoyed living in this world with him too much. Feeling sad, Arthur asks if he can use his powers to protect her now. Despite everything she taught him and the promise they made, Sylvia explains that this outcome was always going to happen. Their promise doesn't apply here. Arthur is surprised by how calm his next words sound. He wonders if it's his gratitude or the time they spent together that changed him. He tells her that he doesn't care if she's a dragon or a monster. She's family to him. Sylvia reminds him that he already has a mother, so Arthur decides to call her Grandma instead. She's taken aback, but after a moment asks him to say it again. He does, with a big smile. Sylvia can't help but smile back and thank him, but with time running out, she pushes him into the portal. Arthur holds on to the egg and feather, stepping into the portal, but just before it closes, he turns around and says he doesn't want to leave, he wants her to come with him. The portal shuts just as he says it, and he's forced to leave her behind. Once Arthur is gone, Sylvia lets the time-freezing magic end. Since she hasn't moved from her spot, the dark energy attack hits her directly, knocking her to the ground. Despite her condition, the enemy doubts that the attack was enough to kill her. That's when Sylvia proves him right. She launches a surprise counterattack at close range. The blast is massive, shaking the forest. We then cut to two mysterious individuals talking. One of them says she's done enough and agrees to handle the rest. Everything now rests in her hands. As Arthur travels through the portal, he speaks with Sylvia one last time. He tells her he's sad. Sylvia reminds him that this world is full of pain, but that's exactly why they must turn pain into happiness. And it's okay if he can't do that yet. Step by step, he'll get there, because he's the strongest king of all. Finally, she tells him not to let hate and rage fill his heart and to let the light guide his new life. She calls him King Gray, revealing that she knew about his past life. Arthur is shocked. Could she be the one who brought him to this world? He wakes up alone in a forest as he hears a noise from the bushes. Tears are still streaming down his face. Arthur wanders through the forest, still wiping tears from his face, when he suddenly hears a noise coming from the bushes. Instinctively, he turns toward it. As he moves deeper into the woods, another loud scream confirms it. There are people nearby. Without wasting a second, Arthur climbs up into the treetops, moving swiftly from branch to branch, careful not to drop the mysterious egg he's been protecting. Soon, he finds the source of the scream. A young elf girl being kidnapped by a group of mercenaries. They're laughing about how elf girls sell for a high price, bragging that they'll finally be able to leave this cursed forest. Arthur instantly realizes they're planning to sell her as a slave. The scene hits hard, triggering painful memories of the ambush that nearly claimed his and his mother's lives. Those criminals had the same intentions. Rage bubbles inside him, but he remembers Sylvia's teachings, how to stay calm and not let emotions control him. So instead of acting out, he chooses to follow them quietly. As the day passes and night falls, the mercenaries finally stop to set up camp. Arthur debates asking them for directions to the nearest human settlement, but he's more concerned about the girl getting hurt. So he silently prepares, crouching down and focusing his energy. When darkness takes over the forest, Arthur notices the wolves in the camp, strangely obedient. Watching closely, he figures out it's due to magic. That gives him an idea. He tosses something to startle the wolves, causing chaos. The mercenaries rush out, trying to quiet them down before any monsters show up. That's when Arthur strikes. He silently sneaks up on one mercenary who's wandered a bit too far and takes him out with a blade charged with energy. Then he snatches the guy's knife and uses it on another mercenary who approaches after spotting the body. With two down, Arthur realizes how physically exhausting this is in his current body. Moments later, more mercs show up, wondering what's taking so long. Arthur doesn't hesitate. He lunges, managing to wound one in the leg. The guy's scream alerts the boss, who comes out to investigate. Instead of panicking, the leader gets excited. To him, a magical kid like Arthur is a jackpot, way more valuable than the elf girl. So he orders his men not to hurt him. The boss starts charging up a spell, and Arthur watches closely, unsure of what he's about to unleash. Suddenly, the guy attacks. Arthur dodges just in time, then tries to land a kick, but the boss sidesteps it easily. Still, he admits Arthur's got skill. Changing tactics, Arthur throws his knife, this time tied with a string, but the boss catches it mid-air like it's nothing. That's when he charges at Arthur with lightning speed and lands a brutal kick. Arthur hits the ground hard. The boss smirks, lifting Arthur up by the legs to get a better look at his prize. But Arthur channels fire magic into his leg and blasts it directly into the mercenary's hand. Screaming in pain, the boss drops him. Furious, the merc mutters that he'll just sell Arthur's corpse to one of those crazy collectors. But while he's distracted, Arthur hurls his knife one last time, straight into the guy's forehead. With the leader dead, the last wounded merc begs for mercy. Arthur refuses. The elf girl had begged for mercy too, and they ignored her. After finishing him off, Arthur climbs into the wagon, gently removes the blindfold from the elf girl, and for a moment sees a strange silhouette over her face, something he doesn't quite understand. He brushes it off and tells her she's safe now. Outside, she notices his arm is hurt and looks worried. Arthur gets it, it's the kind of thing normal kids would freak out about. And come to think of it, this is the first time he's been with someone his own age in a long time. He covers the bodies and tells her that no child should have to see something like this. But the girl points out that he's a child too, so his logic makes no sense. When she asks what happened to the bad men, Arthur simply says, "They had an unfortunate accident. But you're safe now, and that's all that matters." Relieved, the girl smiles. Arthur grabs some gear from the mercenaries, tells her goodbye, and prepares to leave. He's got his own journey to continue, his own version of The Last of Us. But just as he's about to walk away, she tugs on his sleeve. He instantly realizes she doesn't want to be left alone. Gently, he explains that he needs to go find his family, that he has important things to do. Still, she won't let go. Curious, Arthur asks, "Aren't elf kids supposed to be safe in the forest?" She shakes her head. "My parents said the tree monsters eat kids." Turns out she got lost chasing bugs and has no idea how far she's wandered. Worse, her village is in the opposite direction from where Arthur's headed. He sighs. There's no way he can just abandon her now. He agrees to help her, then turns to the wolves. He has no idea how to control them and thinks maybe it'd be best to give them a painless end. But then, out of nowhere, she makes a surprising suggestion. She asks Arthur to release the animals, which worries him. What if they get attacked out there? But she reassures him not to worry. The creatures were only used by bad people, and the people of the forest respect all forms of life. Her words convince Arthur, and once he sets them free, the wolves disappear peacefully into the forest. Arthur smiles, relieved nothing went wrong. With nothing holding them back now, she asks Arthur to accompany her so she can lead him back home. They begin walking through the forest, continuing until daylight breaks. That's when Arthur realizes he still doesn't know her name. She introduces herself as Tizia Elida, and Arthur gives his name in return. While preparing a small meal, he encourages her to eat, even if she's not hungry, since they might still have a long way to go. His advice reminds him of a time when Sylvia forced him to eat. He realizes he sounded just like her. Tizia wrinkles her nose and complains that the food smells weird. Arthur explains it's just dried meat boiled with a little salt, though he admits it might taste better with some herbs. She makes a funny face while eating, but soon says she's craving something sweet. Arthur reflects on how he's always seen food as just fuel. Watching her, he figures maybe he could learn a thing or two about being a kid from Tizia. Then she asks what he's doing in the Shirewood. Arthur replies that he got separated from his family. That hits home for Tizia, who realizes they're kind of in the same boat, even if she won't be going with him when he heads back. Curious, Arthur asks what life is like in the land of the elves. As they keep walking, Tizia tells him that Eleanor is a fun place. Her parents are always busy, so she usually spends time with her grandpa and some caretakers. Later, Arthur notices the trip is taking longer than expected, and there's still no sign of the elven land. Looking toward Tizia, he sees some glowing bugs fluttering around her. He asks about them, and she says they're common in Eleanor. They use them to mark paths. She catches one on her finger and offers it to Arthur. When he declines, she puts it on his ear anyway and says it looks good on him. Like an earring, the little bug flits away shortly after, and Arthur guesses this is just how kids play. Switching topics again, Tizia says she's excited to train at her teacher's house once her mana wakes up. Arthur finds it interesting. Apparently elves don't have formal schooling, but he keeps that to himself to avoid confusing her. Just then, they notice one of the wolves from earlier is trailing behind them. Arthur decides to ignore it for now and keeps walking. When night falls, they set up camp, but Arthur hears the howl of the horned wolf from earlier and regrets not killing it. He tells Tizia to rest inside the tent. He'll stand guard outside. Alone, he reflects on everything that happened that day. He also wonders what it was that Sylvia had wanted to give him. Later, Tizia comes out and asks if he's really not going to sleep. She says her grandpa told her not to sleep near men, but promises she won't tell anyone. Arthur reassures her he's not tired, but she insists. If any kids are wandering around out here, they could get in trouble. He teases her, asking if she's scared of ghosts. She clarifies that she's just thinking about their safety and says he should keep watch from inside the tent instead. Eventually, he gives in. Once inside, she tells him she's not scared or anything, but insists he shouldn't leave without telling her and that he better not fall asleep first. That's very important. Before drifting off, she asks if he's from the human kingdom. She heard that human men are gross and have lots of wives. Arthur is confused and jokes that there must be elf guys like that too. But it turns out Tecia doesn't even know what gross really means. As he tries to explain, he realizes she's already fast asleep. Watching her, he figures this must be what it's like to have a little sister. The next morning, they set off again. Arthur notices Tecia seems so relaxed with him that she's almost forgotten about the slavers. That bothers him. Her family is still out there, and he doesn't want to waste time getting her back to them. Then, something unexpected happens. An intense, stabbing pain radiates from Arthur's manicore. Tecia quickly asks if he's okay. He says he's fine, but she decides to search for herbs that might help. That could be dangerous, but Arthur's voice doesn't reach her, so she can't hear his warning. Time passes and the pain in his manicore doesn't get any better, it just keeps coming more frequently. He considers telling Tecia about it, but quickly decides against it. He doesn't want her to worry. Just then, that same horned wolf from earlier reappears, and Arthur definitely doesn't take that as a good sign. Meanwhile, Tecia returns, happy that she found something she thinks could help with his stomach pain, unaware of the real issue. Arthur immediately tells her not to come closer, worried the wolf might attack. But instead of getting aggressive, the wolf calmly drops a dead animal on the ground and leaves. Tecia assumes it's a thank you gesture for setting him free. Arthur's shocked. He just doesn't get how animals think like that. Later that night, they cook and eat the animal the wolf left behind. Arthur is surprised at how delicious it tastes, like something from the capital. Tecia tells him she couldn't find any healing herbs, but she did find some mushrooms. Apparently, women in Illinois eat them all the time because they're really nutritious. Arthur tries one, but all it does is give him terrible gas, something Tecia clearly didn't expect. That night, once they're inside the tent, Tecia starts talking about bedtime stories she used to hear to fall asleep. But after a few minutes, Arthur can't help but doze off. The next morning, they continue their journey. Arthur has no choice but to push through the pain in his manicore. During the walk, Tecia brings up that since they know each other better now, she wants to call him Ark, like they're real friends. He agrees, but he doesn't say much else. So she asks if that's all, and Arthur replies with a mock formal tone that, for a low-born village boy like him, it's an honor just to be walking beside Lady Tecia Aralead. She doesn't get what he's trying to say, saying that kind of old man joke is weird. Arthur teases her back, saying she's just a crybaby who doesn't want to go to the bathroom alone. Tecia gets a little offended, asking him to be quiet since she was actually trying to be nice and become friends. Arthur figures her mood must be better if she's joking around like this. Soon after, they come across the spot they were looking for, some kind of glowing light embedded in a tree. Arthur feels uneasy, unsure what it is. A wind blows from it, gently pushing him back. Tecia approaches it and then turns to Arthur, inviting him to come with her. This, she says, is the entrance to the land of the elves. Together, they stepped through the portal and arrived in a hidden city surrounded by thick forest, an elven place full of towering trees, floating lights, and ancient beauty. Teshta looked right at home, landing gracefully as if she'd done this 100 times. Arthur, though, ended up flat on the ground with a painful thud. Almost instantly, a group of elven warriors rushed over. The sudden use of magic must have triggered some kind of alert. Without warning or kindness, they grabbed Arthur like he was some wild animal. He panicked and looked to Teshta, but she just stood there quietly, not lifting a finger to help. In that moment, something broke inside Arthur. He thought back to their journey, how they'd gotten close, and realized maybe he'd been too quick to trust her. It felt like all her kindness had been a setup, and he cursed himself for letting his guard down. Things escalated fast. One of the elves said they should just end Arthur's life right there. But then Tesha finally reacted and stepped in, stopping them. She stood her ground and defended him, saying she wouldn't be alive if not for him. Still, the officer didn't buy it and accused Arthur of messing with her mind. Just as things were about to get worse, an elder elf stepped through a portal of his own. His presence silenced the crowd. He ordered the soldiers to back off and let the boy go. Tesha ran to him and greeted him with respect. It was her grandfather, a former ruler of this city. He thanked Arthur for protecting his granddaughter and revealed something that made Arthur's heart skip. Tesha was royalty. Arthur was stunned. She'd never once hinted at being a princess. Not long after, her parents arrived in a fancy carriage. They looked shaken but relieved to see her alive. Her father, however, lost his temper when he saw the human. He demanded Arthur be taken away, but the older elf stepped in again, calming things down. He told them this boy may be a human, but he saved their princess. Tesha agreed, and even asked that Arthur be treated as a guest. Her father hesitated. Letting a human into their sacred home was unheard of, almost like breaking one of their oldest laws. But Tesha didn't care about rules or history. She just wanted to share a meal with the friend who kept her safe. Her grandfather said he'd like to speak with Arthur soon, and Arthur couldn't help but feel the man had a strange, powerful aura about him. As they walked toward the palace, Tesha held Arthur's hand, leading him through the city. They passed through a marketplace built right into the forest. Homes were nestled in the trees, bridges twisted through the branches, and magical lights floated in the air. It was beautiful, but Arthur couldn't relax. Everywhere he went, people stared. Some looked confused, others looked angry. It was like the whole city was holding its breath. He could feel the hatred in their eyes, a deep, ancient grudge against his kind. Everything he'd ever read about elves and humans clashed with what he was living now. He looked at Tesha and wondered about her again. She saved him from the guards, sure, but the cold way she looked at him earlier still lingered in his mind. There was a darkness in her he didn't understand. His body ached from the earlier fall, but his heart hurt more from the confusion and doubt. One thing was clear: he couldn't let his guard down again. Eventually, they reached the castle. Tesha was welcomed by her staff with open arms. She told them to treat Arthur with kindness, saying he had risked his life for her, and even though he wasn't one of them, she believed he was someone they could trust. Arthur wanted to talk about everything that had happened, so Tessa brought him to meet her family. Her parents and grandfather were already waiting, and the table was packed with fancy food that looked straight out of a royal festival. Arthur didn't sit right away. He felt out of place, like a guy who wandered into the wrong party. But Tessa gave him a look that made it clear. He belonged at that table. Even so, sitting there at the head of the table, surrounded by powerful elves in a city that hated humans, Arthur felt like a target. Tessa's father, who introduced himself as Alwyn, broke the silence by sharing his name and the Queen's, Muriel. Arthur, trying to stay humble, told them he came from a tiny village in the Sand Kingdom and never expected to be in a palace like this. To Arthur's surprise, Alwyn praised how well he spoke, which gave Arthur a bit of hope. Maybe they'd stop treating him like some lost kid. Then the questions started, mostly about what went down in the forest. Arthur didn't spill every detail, but explained that he got separated from his folks when bandits attacked. He kept quiet about some stuff, partly because it was too painful, and partly because he didn't fully trust the room yet. But when he talked about meeting Tessa and how she was nearly captured, the whole mood shifted. Tessa's dad slammed his fist on the table, furious at the idea of slave traders trying to take his daughter. That triggered a rant about how humans were monsters. Arthur spoke up, saying, "Bad people exist in every race, not just his." Then came the big question: how did a kid like Arthur stop a group of dangerous criminals? Arthur admitted he used a bit of magic. That raised eyebrows. One soldier even called him a liar, claiming he was just trying to trick his way into the kingdom. But Vian, the elder elf, shut that down fast and reminded everyone to stay respectful. Tessa backed Arthur up. She remembered everything clearly: the chains, the fear, and the men who thought they could sell her like an object. Her mom hugged her tight, trying to comfort her. Alwyn, seeing his daughter shaken like that, seemed to soften a little. He thanked Arthur for helping her, but the boy had one simple request. He just wanted to go home. Arthur didn't ask for riches or rewards. All he wanted was to return to Sapan and find his family, but the tension between elves and humans still hung heavy in the room, and Alwyn didn't seem too eager to help. Arthur pointed that out. If elves believed they were better than humans, then maybe it was time they proved it through actions, not just words. That hit hard. Vian smirked slightly, like Arthur had made a solid point. But there was a problem. The portal to Arthur's homeland wasn't something they could use freely. It only opened once every 7 years during a special meeting between the races. The next time, 5 years away. And there was no way Alwyn was going to let a human live among elves for that long. So, he agreed to send Arthur back with a few soldiers the next day. Arthur was beyond grateful, even if his chest was still burning with that strange pain. It flared up again so badly that he had to grit his teeth just to hide it. Later that night, Arthur was given a guest room. As he washed up, the pain grew worse. Alone and exhausted, he looked out at the stars and hoped maybe someone somewhere could hear him. He whispered the name Sylvia in his mind. Even though he didn't know if she still existed, he stepped onto the balcony, letting the wind cool his face. That helped a bit, but the pain wasn't just physical. It was everything. Missing his family, not knowing if they were okay. Watching Tessa laugh with her parents only made it worse. He wondered if his parents were smiling somewhere too, or if they were gone for good. That thought kept him up long into the night. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. His chest pain kept getting worse, and no matter how much he tossed and turned, there was no peace. So, he quietly stepped out for a walk, hoping some fresh air might help clear his head. As he wandered through the quiet kingdom, lost in his thoughts, Tesha eventually found him. She noticed something was clearly off with him. Arthur brushed it off with a playful remark, trying to hide how he felt, but Tesha wasn't in the mood for jokes. She looked a bit guilty about how the others had acted toward him earlier. Arthur didn't seem too bothered though. He understood why they were being cautious. If anything, he felt it proved how much they cared about her safety. He even joked that she should enjoy being the center of attention while it lasts. Tesha didn't laugh. She quietly said things would feel normal again once Arthur found his family. Hearing that made Arthur go quiet. Deep down, he wasn't sure if his parents would even want to see him again. He kept blaming himself for the attack and believed his very existence just brought disaster. For someone so young, he carried way too much guilt. Tesha shook her head. She pointed out how ridiculous that sounded. If she was already sad knowing he'd leave soon, how could his parents not feel the same, or even worse? Her words were warm, and Arthur could feel the weight in his chest loosen just a little. Just then, the night sky lit up with glowing insects drifting in the breeze, almost like floating stars. The sight was magical. Arthur stared at them in silence, reminded of his parents and wondering if they were safe. The beauty of the moment clashed with the darkness he still carried inside. He couldn't forget the fear on that elf's face when the soldiers grabbed him. That memory made him question who he really was. As Arthur was lost in those thoughts, a small object zipped past him. Without thinking, he caught it. It wasn't dangerous, it was just one of those glowing insects. But he wasn't being attacked. It was a test. Lord Vian had been watching, curious about Arthur's reflexes. The elf confirmed it wasn't meant to hurt him, but he wanted to see if the boy's story checked out. Arthur wasn't thrilled about being tested, but Tasha jumped in, clearly annoyed. Vian said he meant no harm. On the contrary, Arthur had sparked his interest. Out of nowhere, Vian summoned a wooden training sword and tossed it to Arthur. He moved Tesha to a safe distance with a wave of his hand. Arthur knew what was coming. He took a stance and rushed in, hoping to land a surprise strike, but Vian was quick, way faster than someone his age should be. Arthur had to use magic just to keep up. Every move Arthur made was dodged, every swing avoided. Even when he tried clever tricks, Vian stayed a step ahead. Then, with one clean strike, the elf shattered Arthur's weapon. A flying shard headed toward Tesha, but Arthur tossed the broken handle to deflect it before it reached her. Not done yet. Arthur tapped deeper into his power and launched another flurry of attacks. Vian responded with the calm of someone who had fought 1,000 battles. It reminded Arthur of the deadly creatures he had faced in another life, how they moved when it was truly kill or be killed. This was real. Despite being outmatched, Arthur's will didn't break, and after pushing himself harder, he finally managed to land a hit. Vian actually looked surprised for the first time. Before anything else could happen, Tesha marched over and gave the old elf a scolding. She didn't care how strong he was, he needed to stop bullying Arthur. Vian, half joking, said he might have lost if he had gone easy. Arthur couldn't believe he was being taken that seriously, but it felt good. Like for once, someone was seeing his real potential. Vian offered something unexpected. He wanted to train Arthur personally. Arthur was speechless. A part of him wanted to say yes immediately, but he hadn't forgotten his family. They had no idea he was still alive. That's when Vian made a promise. He would make sure Arthur's parents got word that their son was safe. The boy lit up at the thought, but before he could say anything, that chest pain hit again, hard. All the joy faded in an instant. Vian, serious now, told him the truth. The pain wasn't random. Arthur had inherited something wild inside him, a force that wouldn't let him live peacefully. That's why this training wasn't just an offer, it was a necessity. Without it, Arthur wouldn't survive. Arthur's body felt like it was frozen in place. His chest throbbed with a sharp pain, and while trying to push through it, something dark and terrifying suddenly burst out from inside him. The strange shape it took looked like a shadowy creature, one that felt too real to be just a nightmare. Arthur, full of fear, shut his eyes tight, unsure if this thing was some twisted form of his hidden fears or the pressure he constantly buried inside. Just when it looked like the shadow was about to hurt him, a soft voice broke through the chaos. It was Tessa's. Her voice brought a strange sense of calm, steadying his heart just enough for him to open his eyes. He came back to his senses and saw Tessa sitting on top of him. For a second, he questioned if he'd been tossed into some fantasy realm. She greeted him with a cheerful "morning," but he shrugged her off and jokingly blamed her for the nightmare. Ignoring the teasing, Tessa reminded him her grandfather was waiting, but Arthur wasn't in the mood to rush. She ended up dragging him out of bed, pointing out his messy hair while Arthur shot back his own comment about hers being worse. As he got dressed, Tessa asked if he planned on staying there for good. Arthur gave a vague answer, calling her princess, which annoyed her to no end. She snapped, pinched his back, and warned him not to use titles like that again. He figured she was already mad enough as it was, but now he wondered if she had another level of rage. They finally stepped outside the castle. In the distance, a carriage was parked where Alduin, the king, was arguing with his father, trying to convince him that Arthur shouldn't be allowed to stay. The usual old bias against humans came up again, something both Alduin and his wife held tightly to. But the old man wasn't having it. He ignored their narrow-minded views and made it clear Arthur was welcome, and that was the end of the discussion. Tessa overheard part of the conversation and didn't hold back. She stood up for Arthur, reminding them that he had saved her life. Alduin muttered a half-hearted thank you, but followed it with more of the same old insults, saying he didn't want a human dirtying their land. That was the last straw. The old man told them to be quiet and ordered Arthur and Tessa into the carriage. As they rode off toward their next destination, Tessa leaned against Arthur's shoulder and dozed off. The old man glanced at them and told Arthur to let her rest. She had woken up early for this trip, which would shape Arthur's future. He then admitted something more personal. Tessa had grown up in a lonely world. Everyone who got close to her had only done so for their own gain, so she'd learned to keep her distance. Hearing that, Arthur finally understood why she always got so irritated when he called her princess. It wasn't about formality. It was about how people saw her, not who she really was. The old man mentioned that the only time Tessa truly smiled was when she was with Arthur. That hit Arthur hard. For the first time, he realized how much he actually meant to her. Arthur started seeing the old man in a new light. Beneath all that royal status and authority, there was someone warm and trustworthy. After everything, Arthur made up his mind. He'd trust this man completely. Soon, their carriage rolled up to a quiet-looking house, and Arthur couldn't help but wonder what kind of person lived here. If even someone like Vian came personally, they had to be important. As they reached the door, Vian suddenly dropped his formal act and turned into a loud, grumpy grandpa, stomping on the door and yelling at whoever was inside. It was kind of funny to see him act that way. But when no one answered, he leaned in to listen, only for the door to swing open hard, knocking him straight to the ground. Out came an old woman with a sharp tongue, clearly not in the mood for nonsense. Vian introduced her as Ranya Darkin, a skilled mage who might be able to help Arthur with what he wanted. Arthur felt a little hopeful. Ranya, despite being blunt, seemed to appreciate Arthur's respectful attitude and let them inside. The place was super plain, nothing magical in sight, just a bucket of water sitting in the middle of the room. Arthur was confused. How was she supposed to help him talk to his parents with just that? Ranya explained that she wasn't your regular mage. She was a seer, someone who could peek into a person's past or future. She tried using her power on Arthur, but something weird happened. She couldn't really see anything. That caught her off guard, and she called him unusual, in a good way. Arthur didn't care much about his future, though. He just wanted to tell his parents he was alive, so they wouldn't be sad anymore. Ranya had him stare into the water while thinking about his parents. She then cast her spell. The bucket's surface shimmered, and suddenly Arthur could see them, his mom and dad, sitting at the table, talking about him. It was his birthday. His mom mentioned how hard it was without him, and his dad looked just as broken. They were living in a big house now, and she was expecting another baby. But neither of them had moved on. Arthur could barely hold back his emotions. Using the magic connection, he spoke to them. He told them he was safe, staying far away for now because of something going on with his body. He begged them not to blame themselves anymore, promised he'd be okay, and reminded them how much he loved them. His mom broke down in happy tears, hugging his dad. Arthur wiped his eyes. Seeing them like that pushed him to make a decision. He didn't want them to suffer again because of him. He asked Vian to train him, seriously this time. But of course, things weren't going to be easy. Not everyone was happy about him staying. Alduin and Marial still didn't like the idea of a human living in their elven city. They thought it was dangerous and shameful. Vian and Tessa had to meet with Alduin again to sort things out. Tessa stood her ground, reminding her father that Arthur had saved her, twice. If they kicked him out now, it would send the message that elves repay kindness with cruelty. Still, Alduin didn't budge. He was more worried about what the people would say. But Vian spoke up, too. He'd never trained anyone before, and yet he chose Arthur. That should be enough to prove Arthur's worth. Faced with pressure from both his father and daughter, Alduin was left with no choice but to give in. Duan finally agrees to let Arthur stay, though he's still unsure about how the other elves will take it. He asks Vion who'll be responsible if things go south. Vion, without hesitating, takes full responsibility. That's all Duan needed to hear. Soon after, Duan and Marial step outside to meet Arthur again. This time, the energy is totally different. Alduin, who once looked down on Arthur, now stands in front of him with a softer tone. He admits he was wrong before, not because of anything Arthur did, but because of how most elves see humans. It's clear now, he's not just doing this out of duty, but because his love for his family pushed him to accept what they want. Arthur notices this shift right away. The man who had once been cold was now smiling and shaking his hand. But Tessa wasn't done. She challenges her father in a playful way. If he really doesn't mind Arthur staying, then he should let her take him out into the city. Since the news about Arthur being allowed to stay was already spreading, Alduin agrees with no complaints. Tessia, excited, pulls Arthur along to explore. Arthur looks around, completely amazed. It's his first time really walking through the elven city, and everything looks magical. Colorful buildings, unique outfits, and people with features he's never seen before. Tessia talks about a popular shop nearby that sells sweet fruits and snacks, and the two hurry to get there before it gets too crowded. While they're on their way, a young elf bumps into Arthur on purpose. Arthur, being polite as always, doesn't make a big deal out of it. He even apologizes, trying to walk away, but the boy glares at him. The elf throws out a rude comment saying Arthur has made him dirty just by touching him, and makes it clear that no matter what anyone says, even Vian, humans like Arthur will never belong here. Normally, Arthur would stay quiet, but after spending time with Tecia, he's picked up a bit of her playful spirit. When the rude elf turns to Tecia, saying she should stay away from Arthur to keep her good image clean, Arthur decides to mess with him a bit. The elf introduces himself proudly, acting like he owns the place. Arthur responds with an exaggerated bow and purposely messes up the guy's name in a way that sounds like an insult. The crowd chuckles. The noble elf realizes he's being mocked and, trying to save face, challenges Arthur to a duel right there. That sort of thing isn't common in the city, so it quickly draws a crowd. Everyone stops to watch. If Arthur refuses, it'll look like he's weak, and it could make Vian and the royal family look bad too. Even though Tecia tells him it's not worth it, Arthur steps forward. The noble elf asks Tecia to be the judge, and just like that, the fight starts. The proud elf charges forward confidently, but Arthur doesn't waste time. With just one clean hit, he knocks the guy to the ground. Everyone watching is stunned. Tecia shakes her head. She'd warned him earlier that Arthur wasn't someone to mess with. Since the noble didn't listen, he got what he deserved. She grabs Arthur's hand and runs off, laughing. Arthur follows, smiling. This was the first time he really felt like he was starting to fit in. As the days pass, Arthur and Tecia grow closer. They hang out often, grabbing food, studying, and just enjoying each other's company. Anytime someone gives Arthur trouble, Tecia's there in a flash to back him up. After one of their usual outings, they stop by a railing and talk quietly as the sun sets. Arthur knows it now. His training and a new chapter in his life is just getting started. The next day rolls around and Arthur looks a little off. Tessa notices it right away and tries to figure out what's on his mind. He seems lost in thought, like he's carrying a heavy weight inside. What she doesn't know is that earlier he had a serious talk with Vian. Vian had reminded him that he was all alone in a new place. No family, no real friends to lean on yet. It was just him, trying to find his place. But even with all that, Arthur had chosen to stay. Vian didn't sugarcoat things either. He told Arthur that the training would be rough, way tougher than anything he'd been through before. Still, Vian gave him a chance to back out, but Arthur said no. He wanted this. He was ready. Vian told him to ignore the pain building in his mana core for now and focus on what's ahead. Now, looking at Tessa, Arthur feels more sure about his decision. He's pumped for training, even though he knows it won't be easy. He's been through battles with his father before, but something about this challenge feels bigger. Still, he's fired up and ready to face it all head on. He knows it won't be simple, but he's not backing down. Tessa, always the competitive one, throws in her support too. She isn't about to let Arthur outpace her. If he's going to train hard, she's going to train even harder. The next morning, the real training begins. Arthur stands before Vian, who lays out how everything will work going forward. It's clear now. This isn't just some phase. This is a turning point in his life. As he takes his first steps into this new journey, Arthur can't help but think how fast everything has changed. Life here moves at a different pace. He's only been in the Elven Kingdom for a short time, but already he's learning, growing, becoming someone new. He knows it was the right choice to stay. Time passes quickly. Training becomes part of their routine. Even Tessa's gotten better. She's now able to use Harana. One morning, she walks into Arthur's room to wake him up, but he's completely out cold. After calling him a few times with no luck, she decides to use a little magic to snap him out of sleep. He jumps up, yelling, confused and half asleep, wondering why she didn't just nudge him awake. She just grins. She had tried the gentle way first. After watching the king and queen head off for a meeting, things calm down a bit. Tesha hands over some breakfast to her friend, a sandwich she made herself. He munches on it with zero hesitation, clearly not wasting time with compliments. A little later, they're both out on the training field, stretching and gearing up. Vian, their instructor, isn't thrilled that they arrived later than usual. He casually tosses them wooden swords, ready to get started. As the two get into sparring mode, talking tough like they're about to finish each other, Vian can't help but think, it's probably time to step things up. Before long, Tesha is flat on her back, catching her breath after a rough match. Vian shifts the lesson over to magic. He pulls out a book and starts going over the basics. Magic starts with mana, which is basically the fuel behind every spell. Once someone learns to control that energy, they can connect with one of the natural elements, stuff like water, wind, fire, or earth. What element you get depends a lot on your background. Some folks are naturally tied to certain elements. For example, elves usually connect with wind, dwarves with fire or earth, and humans, well, they've got the potential to use any of them. Still, most people just stick with one, even if they could handle more. But once in a blue moon, there's a human who can control all four. While Vian goes on, Tesha's still lying on the ground asking why Arthur doesn't train his body and magic together like she does. Vian doesn't sugarcoat it, he says the boy's still too weak. Arthur suddenly clutches his chest, pain hitting hard. Vian calmly explains it's because Arthur's mana core has something extra, a beast's will. That kind of thing throws off the balance between his energy and his body, causing pain whenever it flares up. Hearing the word beast sends Arthur's thoughts spiraling, trying to figure out what it really means. Vian says that before anything else, Arthur has to get his mana flowing smoothly through his body. Tesha teases him a bit, saying the real reason he's hurting is because she totally beat him in their duel. Arthur grumbles back that taking a hit from her is enough to make anyone see stars. He thinks back to when he first awakened his mana, something most gifted kids do around age 10. Tesha actually unlocked hers at 9 and has been pushing him in training ever since. Seeing that Arthur still has energy, Vian makes a decision. It's time to try something big. He's going to awaken the beast will inside him. If it works, Arthur might finally stop dealing with the pain and maybe even become a beast tamer someday. Vian raises his hand and casts a fire spell aimed at Arthur's core. But something strange happens. As soon as the spell connects, it loses control, exploding with force and knocking both elves off their feet. When the smoke clears, a glowing symbol flashes under Arthur's eye, then vanishes. He passes out cold. By evening, Arthur is back at the palace, lying in bed. He slowly wakes up and sees Vian watching over him. The elf looks relieved but serious. He checks how Arthur's feeling, and the boy manages to say he's okay, just a little out of it. Then Vian asks if Arthur really knows what the beast's will is. That triggers a memory. Arthur remembers when Sylvia revealed she was actually a dragon. When he shares that, Vian's face goes stiff. He warns Arthur to keep that information to himself. The will of a dragon is something dangerous, and if word gets out, it could bring a lot of trouble. Pushing that aside, Vian reminds Arthur of something important. He's set to return home in 4 months. That news shocks Arthur, who thought he had a couple of years left in El Noir. But Vian says there's a big event coming up, a cultural exchange between the kingdoms, and like it or not, Arthur's got a part to play. The next day, news spread that the gates to Zira City would soon open. That's when it hit Arthur. This must have been the reason the king and queen headed out earlier. But while he sat there, lost in thought, Vian noticed something was bothering him. The boy was finally going to see his parents after all this time, but he didn't seem all that excited. Vian didn't push it though, he just told Arthur to get some rest. Tomorrow's training wouldn't be any easier. Arthur wondered if Tesha knew what was coming, and turns out she already got the heads up from her folks. That night, as Arthur lay in bed, thinking about the 4 months he had left in El Noir, something strange started happening. The egg Sylvia gave him started cracking, and a weird magical energy filled the room. Through a small crack, a bright, glowing eye peeked out. Arthur froze. Then the egg fully broke open, and out came a tiny dragon, barely the size of a loaf of bread. Arthur gently picked her up, but the little thing suddenly bit him, and it wasn't just a nip, it burned. But almost instantly, a symbol appeared over the bite, and the pain just faded away like magic. Then, out of nowhere, Arthur heard a voice in his head. It wasn't scary, just surprising. The baby dragon was speaking directly into his thoughts. He decided to name her Sylvie after her mother. She seemed to like it. Lying there, completely stunned, Arthur stared at the mark on his arm, wondering what it meant. He couldn't believe it. He was basically a dad now. At 8 years old, exhausted, he passed out, with the tiny dragon curling up beside him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Next morning, Tesha barged in to wake him up, like she always did. But as soon as she yanked the blanket off, she screamed. Not out of fear, though, more like she just saw the cutest thing ever. She was ready to cuddle Sylvie on the spot, but the dragon wasn't having it and darted under Arthur's chin to hide. Later, as they walked to training, Tesha kept trying to get Sylvie's attention like she was calling a puppy. The dragon growled and stayed glued to Arthur. Once they reached the field, Vian nearly lost it. Not only had the dragon's will awakened, but she was walking around like it was no big deal. Knowing nobody would believe it was a real dragon, Vian told Arthur to just say she was a rare mana creature. End of story. Now that Arthur was a beast tamer, his training had to level up. He had to strengthen both his magic center and the new beast energy. And the best way to do that? Real combat. Vian didn't hold back. He launched a wave of intense power and then morphed into this dark, monstrous figure. In a blink, he vanished and reappeared behind Arthur like some kind of horror movie ghost. Soaked in sweat, Arthur threw up his hands, begging for mercy. It was honestly terrifying. When Vian turned back to normal, Arthur admitted he couldn't even sense the elf while he was moving. Vian explained the form was a mix of wind and sound magic, a high-level combo that burned through mana super fast. After the scare, they got back to regular training. Arthur kept improving fast, so much that the stabbing pain in his chest was completely gone. His body had finally adapted, and he could handle the strain like a pro. Even with all the training, Arthur still found moments to enjoy life like a normal kid, especially with Tesha. During the big festival in town, they went out together. Tesha seemed grumpy for some reason, though. While they were out, Arthur bumped into this elf who acted like he owned the place. Firith Ifsar, 2. Only problem? Arthur had no clue who he was, which made the guy lose it. To jog his memory, Firith challenged him to a fight. Cut to the next moment. He's on the ground with a bloody nose, totally wrecked. His friends stood there speechless. Tesse reminded Arthur who the loudmouth was. Once he remembered, Arthur helped him up politely. Firith didn't like it, but he took the hand. One of Firith's friends joked that this whole thing was probably a weird way of making friends. He even told Arthur to just call him Fee, like everyone else. Firith looked like he wanted to disappear. Arthur asked if they were part of the exchange program, and Fee puffed up, saying they were chosen based on skills, but his buddy quickly exposed him. It was only for rich kids. Arthur figured Fisha must have been picked for the same reason. She looked embarrassed. Then Fee made a rude comment about not letting the weak princess wander off again. That was it. Tesha punched him so hard he might as well have joined the stars in the sky. People nearby honestly thought he was done for. Arthur dragged her away from the crowd, scolding her for not acting more royal. In another life where Arthur once watched a man's family fall apart in front of him, he knew he would have never dared say something like that. Tesha cried. She wasn't just upset about the fight. She was sad that Arthur was leaving soon. She called him an old man and ran off. That night, Arthur went to find her and asked if she wanted to take a walk in the woods. Maybe it was time to patch things up. Eventually, they reached a restricted area, but Tesha promised it would be worth it. As they ventured deeper, a few horned wolves appeared, adding an eerie beauty to the moonlit forest. Later, they moved out of the dense woods and set up a small campfire in an open field. Tesha was practically falling asleep on her feet. She pretended she wasn't, of course, but it was obvious she could barely keep her eyes open. At one point, she even mistook a tree for a monster. Arthur teased her, saying she was still scared of ghosts, but Tesha insisted it was just the cold, and then threw what looked like 9 pounds of firewood onto the flames. She asked what the human kingdom was like, but Arthur couldn't give her a clear answer. He'd only spent a short time there after all. Then softly, Tesha admitted. She wished he could stay in the Elven lands forever, but before she could say anything more, she drifted off completely. The next morning, Arthur finished packing for the long-awaited cultural exchange. The kids gathered at a park to begin their journey. Arthur received a special compass engraved with the Ali crest from his master so he wouldn't lose his way again, and so he'd have a way back to EIR someday. Curious, he asked where Tesha was. Her parents glanced at each other with a somber expression. Moments later, the magical portal to the Elven realm opened. Arthur stood near it, alongside Eth and his group. Then out of nowhere, Tesha came running, shouting his name, Artie. She tripped and fell to her knees. Arthur rushed over and offered her his hand with a gentle smile. Desperate, she begged him to eat well during the trip. He wrapped her in a hug and reassured her that he would. He told her he'd miss her. Dearly choked up by his words, Tesha hugged him tighter, tears streaming down her face, and whispered the same. And so, after a long journey to the floating city of Cyrus, Arthur stepped out of the carriage, leaving behind the other children who had traveled with him. Without wasting a moment, he grabbed his bags and headed straight toward a house before knocking on the door. He took a deep breath, bracing himself to finally reunite with his parents. After all this time, he was greeted by a little girl who froze in fear at the sight of the boy. At that moment, Allison Reynolds rushed over, chasing after their daughter Elena, who had run off in the middle of lunch. And that's when Arthur's parents saw their son. After so many years apart, it took the parents a second to believe what they were seeing. But once it hit them that the boy in front of them was really their son, they ran to him and held him like they never wanted to let go. Even at her young age, Elena stood strong. She looked up at her mom and gently tried to calm her down, showing a surprising sense of maturity. That one word, Mom, sent Arthur's thoughts flying back to that awful day long ago. The memory of his dad yelling at him to grab his mom and run came rushing back. Back then, Arthur had wanted to stay and fight, but his father had made it clear his job was to protect his mom and little sister, who wasn't even born yet. Arthur crouched down to meet Elena at eye level. The moment she realized who he was, her big eyes filled with wonder. She'd heard stories, but meeting him for real was something else. Their mom gently explained that Arthur was her big brother, and you could practically see the gears turning in the little girl's head as she tried to make sense of it. Once everyone settled down inside, the questions started flying. The first thing Mom wanted to know was if Arthur was healthy. She'd last seen him sick and struggling. When he told her he was doing fine, she immediately moved on to whether he was eating well. Ray just laughed, used to his wife's way of showing love through questions. Elena's eyes lit up when her mom reminded her how often she used to talk about her brother before bed. Arthur smiled and did his best to make her feel comfortable, telling her how happy he was to finally see her face. Later, when things calmed down, Arthur gave them a rough idea of what he'd been through. He left out some key details, especially the stuff about Sylvia. He wasn't ready to share that yet. He did explain how he'd survived thanks to a lucky combo of magic and instincts, how he'd met new people along the way, and how he recovered in a faraway kingdom. He also told them about the strange condition he'd had in his chest, something caused by his early magical awakening, but reassured them that it was all sorted out now. Keeping secrets from the people he loved wasn't easy. Then Reynolds noticed the tiny creature resting on Elena's head and asked about it. Arthur explained that he'd come across a young magical animal during his journey, one whose mother had died. He decided to take care of it, and the little thing, now named Sylvie, had been with him ever since. Elena was instantly obsessed with the fluffy companion, and the parents were just happy to see their son alive and well. Ray couldn't resist asking about Arthur's current magic level, just to see how he stacked up. But Lisa shot him a look. It wasn't the time to turn this into a contest. Still, Arthur asked what his dad had been up to. Turns out Ray had scored a solid job at a well-known auction house and was now in charge of security. Arthur teased him a little about his scruffy beard and was curious about how far Ray had gotten in his magical training. Ray casually mentioned that he'd already hit the deep orange stage a couple of years back, which meant he'd been stuck just below the monarch level for a while now. Arthur was pretty surprised. Mana cores followed a color ranking from weakest to strongest: black, red, orange, yellow, silver, and then white. And each of those had 3 phases: deep, normal, and light. Since Ray was an augmenter, his body had gotten stronger as he moved up the ranks, and he'd already made some serious progress. So when Arthur casually mentioned he'd already hit light red, just a notch below Ray, it completely caught his dad off guard. For someone who barely looked like a teenager, Arthur had made some serious progress. Ray was blown away and instantly wanted to spar in the backyard. Arthur could only smile. After everything, it just felt good to be home again. But before they could enjoy the moment, there was a sudden interruption. A man, a woman, and a kid walked straight into the house, no knock, no warning. Arthur was caught off guard, but guessed the guy must have been someone close to the family. He was right. Ray introduced him as his boss, Vincent, the owner of the auction house. The woman beside him was Vincent's wife. Arthur greeted Vincent with such neat manners that Vincent almost did a double take. Hard to believe this kid was Reynolds' son. When Tabitha presented their daughter Lilia, the air crackled, but not between her and Arthur. The unspoken friction was all between Lilia and Sylvie. A moment later, Reynolds sheepishly admitted the place was actually Vincent's and warned him the yard was about to look like a war zone. Sure enough, he and Arthur stepped outside, long overdue for a friendly brawl. Vincent watched, half shocked they were starting a duel in the middle of a visit. While Ray loosened up, Vincent quizzed the onlookers about Arthur's mana core. If it was already glowing crimson, that meant the boy had awakened crazy early, something even most hotshot kids at elite magic schools only dreamt of. Lisa confirmed there was no bluff in Arthur's record. Tabitha, seeing Vincent's excitement ramping up, tugged him a safe distance back. Arthur, meanwhile, reminded himself the only reason he hadn't climbed another tier was the chaos that followed Sylvia's will. He felt more than ready to plow through future challenges. The match kicked off. Ray moved with the confidence of a seasoned warrior. Arthur matched his father's pace without a hint of hesitation. Their footwork mirrored each other, and the first flurry proved Arthur was leagues ahead of the usual 12-year-old. Ray's casual block of a punch showed he still had plenty in the tank, and Arthur answered by springing in with a fierce kick that forced Ray to guard hard. After a quick exchange, Arthur slipped back, gauging his dad's thoughts. Ray adjusted his stance, signaling the warm-up phase was over. Flickers of flame rolled along his arm. Reynolds had long since mastered his elemental gift. Fire wrapped around him as he charged again. Arthur compared the world's mana to the key he'd used in his past life. Both lifeblood energies, but mana tied to elements, while amplifiers like Ray gained broader freedom once they hit higher levels. Luck had trailed Arthur since birth, and he let that confidence surge. Golden light flared from his palms, stunning the spectators. No more holding back. He blitzed forward, the two clashing with glowing fists, raw power vibrating through the yard as father and son battled for dominance. Ray caught Arthur off guard with a sharp elbow to the chest, sending the boy flying back. Even though Arthur barely managed to block it, the impact still knocked the wind out of him. But instead of crashing, he twisted midair and landed smoothly, like someone who'd been doing this forever. He could feel it. His training in the Elven Forests had really pushed him to another level. The techniques he'd picked up, mixed with knowledge from his old life, made everything click in a new way. He remembered one particular session where things just clicked. That day, something inside him shifted. Now, standing there in the backyard, he let it all out. Sparks lit up under his feet as energy crackled across the ground. The temperature spiked, the air buzzed, and the place looked like a storm had touched down. And yet, he wasn't done. He drew water from a nearby source and sent it shooting forward, combining elements in a way that surprised even him. Ray barely dodged the sudden flood. The match didn't go on for long after that. He stepped back and called it off, clearly impressed. He hadn't expected his son to grow this much, this fast. Everyone watching was stunned into silence. Arthur wasn't just strong for a kid. He was leagues ahead. When the match was over, they all headed inside. Drinks were served, and naturally, the conversation turned to Arthur. Vincent couldn't help but talk about how incredible the boy's potential was. Ray agreed. After all, Arthur had shown signs of mana before most kids could even read. They laughed, sharing old stories, including the time Arthur accidentally blew up part of their home. Eventually, the idea of enrolling him in a top-tier academy came up. Cyrus Academy wasn't just prestigious, it was the place to be. But some hesitated. Arthur was still a kid. Even if he had the power, was he ready? Vincent offered to help. He had connections. But Arthur, exhausted from the fight and a bit overwhelmed, just wanted to rest. He didn't push back, just quietly slipped away to catch his breath. Wandering through the house, he ended up in a part he hadn't seen before. Lilia spotted him and casually pointed out that he was heading straight toward the basement. She didn't explain much, just said she knew a better place to chill. Not knowing what else to do, he followed. The place she led him to was packed with the estate's staff. Older ladies cracking jokes, a cook teasing about her garden being scorched, and a butler trying not to laugh too hard. Arthur felt a little awkward, but also welcomed. Lilia was surprisingly relaxed here. She joked around, asked about food, and argued with one of the maids who seemed concerned about her eating habits. Another whispered to Arthur that Lilia often hid out here when things got too stressful. Her parents had high hopes for her awakening mana, but maybe that wasn't what she really wanted. That night, Arthur's parents came to check on him. They were proud. He had grown a lot, not just in strength, but in who he was becoming. No matter how far he went, he'd always be their boy. Before leaving, Ray gently explained that Vincent only brought up the academy out of care. Arthur understood. The next day, he made a trip to the guild hall. There, he saw familiar faces, the team that had once fought beside him. Twin horns. They greeted him like family, with warm hugs and a few tears. Angela clung to him first, while Jasmine checked him over like he might vanish again. Even the ones trying to act tough couldn't hold back. They shared what they'd been up to, missions here and there passing through the capital, and figured they'd swing by and see how their young friend was doing. It reminded Arthur of something. There was still a whole world out there he didn't know. Maybe the best way to learn about it wasn't through books or schools, but by living it, traveling, seeing different lands, meeting all kinds of people. But even as that thought grew stronger in his heart, something tugged at him. Something he hadn't figured out yet. Somewhere else in the big house, Lilia sat alone, staring at nothing in particular. She too seemed lost in thoughts she couldn't quite share. Others holed up in his room, totally zoned in. Time feels frozen. A coin he's holding just hangs there until his focus breaks, then it finally clinks to the floor. The effort wipes him out. Sweat streams down his face and he flops onto the mat. Shocked the freeze lasted only a heartbeat. Even while gasping for air, all he can think about is staying on track so he can protect the people he cares about. That goal is what keeps him pushing. Sylvie shows up with her usual sparkle and instantly reminds Arthur that he's really, finally home. It's been ages since he last saw his parents, and now there's even a baby sister in the mix. The tiny dragon's only issue? She stinks after getting squeezed half to death by her excited master. Arthur doesn't waste a second. He ferries the reeking little quitter straight to the tub. While he's scrubbing scales, his mind drifts to the Hestia family. Their auction house is clearly rolling in money. He remembers the parents hoping their daughter would chase the mage life, even though the girl never wanted that path. Once the bath's done, Sylvie's sparkling again. But she isn't the only one in need of a tidy-up. The house's ladies burst into Arthur's room and decide he looks just as rough as the dragon used to smell. He's totally lost on how to react. They drag him to a city salon to deal with his mop of hair. The stylist spots a diamond in the rough and trims him into shape. When Arthur steps back outside, he's rocking fresh style that leaves the girls speechless. He finally asks why the sudden makeover, and they spell it out. Nobles and royals shop at the Hestia auction, so he can't stroll around looking like a stray. Tabitha offers to tour him through Cyrus City. Alina tags along with her big bro, and Lilia feeling a bit sidelined after losing her little shadow, admits the outfit is on point. She picked it after all. The crew hits the streets, exploring every corner of the flashy city beyond school. A couple of academy boys flip a white band onto Arthur's head and strut off. Lilia says they're students from Cyrus Academy of Magic, riding their uniforms like crown and scepter. Arthur's still wondering why they targeted him when a powerful glow snags his attention. He tracks it to a shop window, staring at a violet crystal pulsing with energy. Tabitha explains it's a beast core magic energy, pulled from a mana beast that amps up whoever owns it. Arthur notes that elves usually steer clear of this kind of trade. Tabitha explains that the price of a beast core depends on how strong it is. If it still carries the creature's will, it could go for something wild, like 100 gold coins. That's enough money to keep her whole family living easy back in their homeland for centuries. Turns out rare items like that are about to show up in an upcoming auction, and she tells Arthur he might get a chance to check one out up close. Lilia seems interested too, but her mom quickly shuts it down. Just having a beast core doesn't mean someone will suddenly unlock magic, and there's no way they're spending that much on something uncertain. Lilia brings up cheaper versions sold in weapons shops, but Tabitha stands firm. End of discussion. Arthur notices Lilia's mood drop. She doesn't say much after that, and he gets it. The way her mom handled it probably stung. During lunch, he's quiet, not really eating, just thinking about how down Lilia looks, and how her energy totally shifted. It feels like her mom's not just holding her back. Maybe she's trying to protect her from chasing something she might never reach. The pressure from her dad makes it worse. After a while, Lilia quietly slips away from the table and disappears down a narrow alley. Arthur follows her and spots her in a weapon shop, standing in front of a display with 2 small beast cores. She's staring at them like they're her only shot at something bigger. It's clear she's thinking about spending her allowance to buy one. Arthur walks up and tries to remind her gently, just buying one doesn't mean it'll work. But Lilia's made up her mind. She's failed before, and another failure won't crush her. She says Arthur can't understand what it's like to be born ordinary, always told what she can't do. Even now, she has to sneak around just to touch a core her own family won't let her have. She turns to leave, only to bump into some smug students from the Magic Academy. They make a scene out of it, loud enough that the shop owner comes out to check the commotion. But the moment he sees the uniforms, he backs off, clearly scared to get involved. That just gives the academy kids more confidence. One of them even summons fire, trying to look intimidating. Arthur steps in front of Lilia without a second thought. He knows this won't end with words, so he starts prepping his magic, ready to throw down if needed. But right then, Tabitha and Alice walk into the shop and shut the whole thing down fast. The boys get scolded hard and are told to drop their spells. The shop owner tries to warn Tabitha about upsetting powerful families, but she doesn't care. No one messes with someone from her house and walks away without consequences. When the kids hear her last name, their confidence vanishes. That's the family that pours money into their academy. If the school's head found out they were bullying her people, they'd be toast. So they leave, fast. Once everything settles, Arthur turns to head out too, but Lilia grabs his sleeve, just enough to let him know she doesn't want him to go yet. Later, they're back home. Tabitha fills Vincent in on what happened. Alice admits she was more worried about those academy brats than her own son. Lilia apologizes to her dad quietly. Vincent doesn't scold her, he just reassures them all that the incident won't mess up Arthur's future at the Magic Academy. The Hestia family gives a lot of money to the academy, so naturally they hold some power there. That kind of influence means their choices carry weight. Lilia looks down, quietly wondering if her father plans to send Arthur to the academy instead of her. Vincent tries to explain, but she doesn't buy it, not for a second. Right there, in front of everyone, she says something she can't take back. She storms off. Later, when it's time for dinner, Arthur goes to her room to get her, but she doesn't answer the door. As he walks away, he spots a butler in the distance who simply nods at him. Then the memory shifts. A much younger Lilia flashes in our mind, bright-eyed and full of hope. Back then, finding out she'd be going to Cyrus Academy one day felt like a dream come true. She wanted to become a mage more than anything. But as time passed, the excitement faded. her powers never showed up. Year after year she waited. Her parents kept telling her it would happen eventually, that some people just take longer. But those words started sounding empty. Now, hearing that Arthur is going to the very school she had dreamed of, it breaks something inside her. Lost in her thoughts, Lilia doesn't hear Arthur calling out to her again, this time from the basement where the servants usually stay. He figured she might have gone there, and he was right. Arthur's heart feels heavy. He wants to apologize, even if he doesn't really know what he's apologizing for. Just being the one who has everything she wanted feels wrong. But before he says anything, Lilia speaks first. She admits she felt jealous, not because she hates Arthur, but because things changed. Arthur got all the attention she used to have. Her dad now sees Arthur as something special, and that stings. She blames herself for not awakening, for falling behind. She thinks her parents have simply given up on waiting. Arthur understands that feeling of being stuck in the dark, feeling like you failed before you even started. But he also knows how much effort she's been putting in, how hard she's been trying even when no one's watching. So he gently reminds her of that, of how strong she's been. Then, he brings up someone who once gave him hope when he felt completely alone. Someone who showed him beauty when the world felt empty. He shares that memory with her, not to impress, but to connect. He tells her that her parents do notice her effort, the way her father talks to him, that spark in his eye. It's not because Arthur is better. It's because he's new. He's a surprise. That doesn't take away from what Lilia means to them. Finally, Lilia starts to feel a little lighter. She realizes her dad probably pushes her toward magic not out of disappointment, but because he truly believes it'll make her happy. The pressure? That's something she placed on herself. Arthur listens as Lilia pours out her feelings, but deep down, he knows it's more complicated than anyone wants to admit. The more her dad pushes his dream on her, the more others start expecting the same thing, like she owes it to everyone to be something she's not even sure she wants to be. That's when Arthur starts wondering what really matters. Does Lilia even want this path? Later, Arthur makes a decision. He talks to her parents and tells them he sent Lilia somewhere safe. Somewhere she can finally learn magic at her own pace, not for anyone else, but for herself. Her parents are stunned. They panic at first, but Arthur explains she'll be okay. She needed this chance, and maybe this is how she finds her own way. That's when Vincent stumbles on a letter. It's from Lilia. In it, she writes that she doesn't want to hold them back anymore. She's gone off to become stronger, and she won't come back until she's achieved something real, until she can stand tall on her own. Vincent breaks down. It hits him hard. He pushed her too far. All this time, he made her believe she needed magic to be happy, that anything less would disappoint him. And now she's gone, carrying that weight. Through tears, he finally understands that even if she never becomes a mage, she's still his daughter. And that's enough. Just then, Arthur brings Lilia out from the next room. She was never gone. She heard every word. Arthur confesses it was all just a setup to help her parents see things clearly. He knows what it's like to hurt your family, and he didn't want her to go through that. Vincent, overwhelmed, apologizes for everything, for trying to rush Arthur into the academy, for making Lilia feel like she had no other path. He tells her it's okay to choose something else if she wants to, but, to his surprise, Lilia stands firm. She still wants to learn magic, not because someone told her to, but because deep down, that dream still means something to her. She wants to grow strong and use her magic to help people. That's what she's always wanted. Hearing that, her parents hug her tight, and Arthur, he quietly promises to help her make that dream real. Soon after, Arthur sits Lilia and Elena down in the living room. He tells them to sit back to back, close their eyes, and focus on breathing. It sounds simple, but it's the first step. Learning to feel mana starts with calm and focus. Tabitha watches, curious. She's never seen this method before. At first, Elena manages to spot a flicker of light but loses it as her mind drifts. Lilia, meanwhile, sees nothing. Frustrated, she's about to give up. That's when Arthur lightly places his hands on their backs, guiding their rhythm. His gentle flow of magic steadies their breathing, and slowly, something changes. A faint glow appears in the darkness for Lilia. It's soft and warm, familiar, like the kind of beauty that gives you hope. She finally feels something. Later, the basement lights up with cheers. Lilia has awakened her mana, everyone's celebrating. Mariah, overjoyed, whips up a rich, greasy feast to spoil her with, saying, "A milestone like this deserves something special." Arthur tells her it'll take a couple of years of training to really master it, and Lilia wonders aloud what kind of magic she'll have. Arthur just smirks, leaving her guessing, and the two laugh like old friends with the future ahead of them. But while they celebrate, far away, a cloaked man walks towards Cyrus, flanked by knights in full armor. There's a strange excitement in his steps. He's heading to the auction house, and whatever's waiting there, he's ready for the show.